Hey everybody, it's National Novel Writing Month, and I've got a question that I want to do with a video answer rather than straight text. So Simstrations asks, I've got a question that relates to my Nano project. I play Sims and I'm using Nano to write out the story for a Disney Princess Legacy Challenge. Basically, you follow one family for 10 generations, with each gen based on a Disney princess. Gen 1 is Snow White, and one of her kids, the heir, is Cinderella, and so on. But I can't figure out how to make it seem different than just a retelling of Snow White. Help? So, one of the tricky parts of a retelling is trying to come up with a way to separate it, even just a little bit from that story. And this happens with every retelling. But the real key is to make something different. So how do you do that without losing basic essence? In one of my most popular posts on Writers, I did a piece called Make Your Death Mean Something. And in that post, I write about reading a story that a friend had written that I was reading for them, and getting to a certain point in the story where it was near the end, and I sensed that the characters were going to try and kill themselves Romeo and Juliet style. And I posted someplace that if that happened, I would just be so upset. And then as I finished the story, they got to the end, and yes, they did die, but they were killed in a car bomb, or bomb on a bus. So that was able to change that narrative, or that my understanding of that narrative in a way that was positive and meaningful, which again led to that post. So what do you do with this situation? I'm assuming that you're looking to stay in the same time frame, which makes it more difficult. But if you're able to move into a different time frame, then it's much easier. You can have the stepmother be someone who is a witch in actuality, or even just a horrible person. An example of a more modern setting would be the movie Clueless. So Clueless is very heavily based on Jane Austen's book Emma, which unless you read Emma, you won't know that, and I certainly didn't know it at first. But the characters are almost all the same. A lot of the names carry over, and that dynamic where Emma is trying to connect people together in relationships when she's completely missing the relationship that's right in front of her is right there, and it's all part of that story. It ties in together in a way that is modern, but also is true to the story. And that's where you want to try and go. So how do we make this happen, though? The first step is to make sure you have a solid understanding of the story itself. What are the basic elements of that story? You'll notice that when I was talking about Emma, I was able to go through what the story was, the basic idea of it, and the main points that needed to be hit. So when you're looking at Snow White, what are the main elements? Well, you've got a young girl. Her father remarries after the mother dies, which is typical for a fairy tale. The mother doesn't like her. She's got a lot of issues with self-esteem, obviously. Her self-worth at her age as she's getting older and trying to still be the fairest in the land. So how can you morph those elements? And then the fact that Snow White is attempted to be killed, but then the person that is going to kill her doesn't do that, and then Snow White is found again in the situation where she's at. So how can you make that work in a way that is true to the original concept, right? Those are some, that's where you would want to start with. Once you have that framework in place, those basic elements, now you look at what you can do that's different. So in a modern setting, you don't want to name your character Snow White. You may come up with something, something similar. Snow is crystalline, so you could call her Crystal White. I don't know, that'd be a possibility. But anything that moves you enough away from that name that you aren't just automatically thinking about Snow White, right? If you're looking at a modern context, you want to try and have that space to create a fresh character and a fresh idea, rather than just being like, here's Snow White, we're just going to have Snow White, right? You don't want that to be how your story progresses. However, though, I feel like this seems more of a, current era or era that's tied to the story rather than a modern era. So if you're looking at doing something more modern, or sorry, less modern, and something more true to the time frame, you still want to move away from, the specific names. You may have similar names. Take, for example, Little Red Riding Hood. Let's take a step back, right? So Little Red Riding Hood has her name because of the red hood that she gets from her grandmother, rather than that actually being her name. So what if Snow White, her name isn't actually Snow White? And you can kind of dissect the story, the fairy tale, and look for something more genuine and more distinct. So rather than her name being Snow White, she has a name, but because of the qualities of who she is called that, or referred to in that way. And the stepmother may not be an actual witch. She may not actually have that mirror that responds to her like you see like in the Disney movie, but there's elements that tie in that are more realistic and more genuine than what comes from the fairy tale, right? So in that case, you want to, again, know the story, know the details, know those points, but then also with that have a clear sense of identities. And just like you would do with any other story, develop characters that are genuine and unique. So rather than just going with the tropes and going with whatever you saw in a Disney movie or any of the other versions that are out there, you look for some ways to make your character someone specific and someone special rather than just a carbon copy. So once you have some unique and special characters, then you can still hit those beats. And people may recognize those beats, but they won't necessarily assume that those beats are going to happen. And so in that case, you can still tell the story and make it genuine, but add some things in. So think about a fairy tale. Fairy tale is just compressed idea. It takes this whatever story is real that it may be based on and just compresses it into just a small little snippet, right? So expand that snippet. Make some more details in there that aren't in the original story. Some things that will humanize the characters on either side. So it isn't just the witch is evil or the stepmother is evil. It's that she's got these things going on, and this is who she is, and this is why she's motivated the way that she is, right? And Snow White isn't just this perfect little girl who runs off into the woods and hangs out with the 7 dwarfs. You don't even have to go with 7 dwarfs. It just may be like some guys that work in a mine and they're just not very tall. And because Snow White is young and innocent, she just assumes that they're dwarves because whatever reason. So we've talked a little bit, well, quite a bit about those details and the understanding of the story and changing the characters, giving them personalities and identities that are separate from just the little tropes that we have. But the other thing I want to talk about is your idea of setting. So again, we talked about it being a modern setting, an older setting that fits with the time frame of the tale. But one of the things that's unique about fairy tales is that they're stories that we continue to tell because those ideas resonate with us in every generation. We may get to a point where the idea of an evil stepmother doesn't mean anything to us anymore. I don't know. I probably won't be around for that. But regardless, we have these things in place because they appeal to us and they reach into our understanding of the world and how we approach the world. So do that as well when you're using these stories to connect with your readers, right? Make sure that you are engaging in these tropes in a way that is recognizable without being redundant or repetitive, right? Create unique people, create unique worlds, create unique stories, even if they're retellings of stories that you've heard before. And that will help you to move forward in this progression. Now, once you move on from Snow White to Cinderella, that's going to take a little bit of work. You're going to have to actually figure out who this prince is that marries Snow White in that first part of the story, because we don't know anything about him except that he's a good singer. Well, mediocre, I guess. Anyway, good luck with your story, and if you have other questions, you can send them to us up here probably. I can make that work. Also, if you are interested in seeing the Patreon page or sending us a coffee, that would be great. Thank you.